Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Rick McPartlin with me here today. Rick is a lifetime learner focused on transferring value to others using revenue science to create leveraged, low-friction business context. Spent years working with the world's largest companies before focused on small to medium-sized businesses and the creation of revenue science, removing the cost of the chaos to produce revenue. Love it. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Well, thank you, Tim. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So why don't you give us a snapshot of your business right now?
Well, we spent 40 years creating revenue as a science. We had the opportunity, as you mentioned, to really hone it through the first dozen years with the biggest companies in the world: Siemens, Philips, Johnson Johnson, AT&T, Ernst & Young, people like that. And then I met an organization today known as Vistage about 20-some years ago and fell in love with the mid-size market.
Okay.
So we took all the science that we created about how you create revenue intentionally and predictably and focused in on the mid-size market. So that's kind of where we started. Today, we bring that to the market through our favorite way to do it is to actually certify people so that they learn the skills, learn the process, and can do it for themselves.
Okay, excellent. For our listeners, can you maybe break down? I mean, I think most people knew the names you dropped earlier, but what's the range of revenue to define the mid-size market?
90% of our business comes from Vistage members. Vistage, their membership is typically between 5 million and $1 billion. And so our specialty is B2B companies, typically under 100 million and over 10.
Okay. Excellent. And geographically, are they just national or are they global?
They've been any place you can imagine. For years, half of my business every year for almost 15 years was in Canada.
Huh.
So while I live in Arizona, I could go back. I could be my own snowbird.
Yeah, reverse snowbirding.
Yeah, reverse snowbirding. Yeah, when I learned, one of the best lessons I ever learned was when I drove by, was in a cab and I drove by a bank and it had a thermometer as part of its signage, and it showed centigrade and Fahrenheit at both 40 below. And I said to the cabbie, I said, that thing's broken. It says centigrade and Fahrenheit are the same. And he corrected me and said, that's where Fahrenheit and centigrade cross. So that was one of my great learnings.
Yeah. Awesome. Or unfortunate that you were there at 40 below, but yeah.
No, that whole trip was really interesting. I'd never been any place 40 below. We got to the Marriott and found the kitchen was frozen.
I was going to say, I'm surprised the cars were working.
Well, that's why I didn't rent one, because I figured the cabbie up there has got to know how to keep it going or whatever.
Right.
So, that was a fascinating trip when you're not used to that.
No, for sure. I'm from Minnesota and up at college at the University of Minnesota Duluth. There was some cold times where you have a block heater that you can plug in your car into the wall to keep the engine, but that doesn't matter if the air is so cold that things don't run anyway. And it's even hard to breathe sometimes. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, that was something I'd never experienced before. And I grew up in Michigan and thought I was used to cold weather, but when you get below 20 below, I'd never done that before. So that was a real experience.
I'm sure. What was the Canadian connection?
In Canada, they have a version of the Vistage organization that I do most of my work with. And so I was a speaker up there all the time. And way back in 2008, I was their speaker of the year. And it was just one of those things that if I was willing to fly to Canada, I ended up with a lot of business up there.
Okay. You're big in Canada. Okay.
I'm big in Canada, apparently. But I love the work in Canada. It's more like the Midwest when I grew up, a little slower and much more human to human as opposed to everything being digital. So
Okay, sure. More civility, a little.
yeah, and it just you value some different things up there. It's similar to small town USA, but big town Canada is kind of reflective of small town USA.
Okay. Interesting. So tell us a little bit more about revenue science. When this started, how you became proficient in it, and then how you use it today.
Yeah. I had grown up in Michigan. My family's been in the auto industry since 1912.
Okay. Wow.
And we received money from General Motors from 1912 until they declared bankruptcy in 2007. So kind of the automotive thing was part of, my DNA. And I realized shortly after college that there was a big transition coming. And the transition was the Japanese are on their way. And all of a sudden, the world is talking about things like Six Sigma and Lean.
Yep.
And there was a whole new set of conversations. And I watched the auto industry destroy itself. And so many of my friends, they lost their businesses and their homes. And kind of the focal point was going with my father-in-law, who was the controller of a third generation tool and die shop that employed 200 people, and go in and take his box out of his office, and his controller locked the place up for the last time when they went out of business. And that kind of had an impact that was unnecessary. And my world has always been on the selling side of things. And so I tried to figure out why these people were going out of business. And I started to examine if Toyota could do Six Sigma with 100,000 suppliers and 2 million humans, and they could work at a Six Sigma level. Why couldn't we get sales and marketing to play well together?
Right.
And so decided that we should be applying the concepts from Lean and Six Sigma in today's sciences to the production of revenue.
Okay.
And so back in the early 80s, that kind of started a journey, and realized there was not a single reason in the world that you couldn't apply the same intentionality and the same discipline and science to the production of revenue. It's certainly less complex than a supply chain with 100,000 suppliers. And so we spent the last now 40 years building that. And a way to think about it is if I came in and you and I were going to talk about, and you certainly live in this world of medical science, everybody goes, oh, I know what that is. But I bet you there isn't one person in 1,000 that knows medical science is actually 76 different sciences under one concept umbrella.
Right.
And that the application is really based on diagnosis and application of those 76 sciences, depending on the specific case or person that you're looking at.
Sure.
Revenue science is the same, except it's 40-some sciences under one umbrella. And it really takes all 40 for an organization to either succeed or fail, because they're all having a tug of war on what you're going to go do or not going to go do.
Okay. So can you give us an example?
Sure. The first one to just think about, let me talk about myths, because in medical science, if we talk about myths, we might want to realize the last medical treatment we gave George Washington before he died was we bled him.
Okay.
And we've been doing bleeding for a couple of 100 years and thought that was a good idea. Well, that was one of those myths, and myths are defined as partially true evidence.
Right.
And so somebody lived when they bled them, and then they thought, well, let's just keep doing that until we got smart enough to know that's really not a great idea. In revenue science,
some bad humors.
Yeah,
that they released.
Exactly. And revenue science, when we look at scientific practice, for 150 years, starting mid 1800s, the world was dominated by the seller. Because if you were Edison and you created the telephone, you were the only person, or you created electricity and the telephone, you were the only person, Bell created the telephone. But when you create it, nobody knew what it was. They'd never used one before.
Sure.
And so people had to have faith in the seller that electricity was a good idea, that a telephone was a good idea, that telegraph was a good idea. And so the seller was the only one who could tell them, how does it work? Why do you care? How much should it cost? What will you do with it when you get it? And so for 150 years, we believed what sellers taught us.
They were also first to market, so they were the only competition.
Absolutely. And so, and if you think about from the time we got electricity, then, okay, I got electricity. What do you do with it? Oh, I guess I can light a light with it. Oh, now I got a light, I got electricity. Well, maybe I need a toaster or an ironer or an oven. And so all of a sudden, all these new things kept coming one right after another. And they became, in our terms, they became fulfillment bubbles. Okay. Because nobody in the world had a toaster until the first one was sold, and then everybody wants one. Kind of like our kids want certain toys at Christmas or new video games or that kind of thing. It becomes a momentary monopoly because, as you say, this is the first one to market. So if you want a toaster, you better buy mine. And so as soon as you bought a toaster, well, then eventually it's a radio. And then eventually it's a little tiny black and white TV. Then it's a big black and white TV. Then it's a little color TV. And so there's this constant rollout of new products. You really don't know what they are, but you know you got to go buy one. And then all of a sudden, 25 years ago, the internet showed up. And the whole thing transitioned from the buyer was in charge until about 2000. The last 25 years, the buyer's in charge starting 25 years ago, because the internet told them how to watch out for a good TV versus a bad TV, an expensive one versus reasonably priced one, a high quality one from a low quality one. And so all of a sudden,
the information age, yes,
the seller's in charge. And today, there's a ton of research that says even in sophisticated B2B environments, where somebody's spending 50 or 100 grand, they believe they can make that decision without ever talking to the seller. And once they've made the decision, the only time they want to talk to the seller is to negotiate price. And so the whole world is flipped. And what we learned at business school, when I went to business school, today, if I look at those books, most of it's actually wrong. It was never right, but it was myth consistent.
Okay.
And so as long as it was myth consistent, partially true evidence, right, and you didn't have any other evidence, you said, well, okay, that must be the way the world works. So let's go do it. Today, we have enough science and enough data that we can actually know the difference. People still say today, well, salespeople should be making 50 cold calls a day. First, cold calling is not a sales job at all. It's a marketing function.
Right.
And one of the things we've been measuring in one of our best historic stories with Johnson and Johnson, we helped them realize that their salespeople work 60 hours a week, but they only sold 4. And so we measure a thing called cost per sales hour. And if you were to survey 1,000 companies here in the Valley, their cost per sales hour is probably around $3,000 an hour.
Wow.
Because most of the time, salespeople aren't selling. They're doing other stuff. They might be doing cold calling. They might be doing expense accounts. They might be making up the message or the conversation they're going to have. But what they're not doing is selling. Selling is defined as moving a deal forward. No deal, no selling. And so once you realize the average salesperson is doing well if they're selling 3 or 4 hours a week, and then when you look at what you charge, what they cost you, plus their travel, plus their health care, plus the other stuff, those 3 or 4 hours a week are costing you $1,000 to $3,000 or $4,000 an hour. That's pretty expensive.
For sure. So the solution.
Well, the solution is there's just like if I were to ask people, for the average human being, what's a good medical science context for your life? What things should you do or not do? Most of us could do a list. Well, I shouldn't smoke 2 packs of Camels. I shouldn't be drunk every night. I should get good sleep. I shouldn't be highly stressed. I should have a good diet. You can conceptualize a context for your body to live in that's likely to be healthy and happy and live a long time if you follow that context. Okay. Revenue science is the same thing. There is a context for it. And, you need to think about how you organize your business, structure your business. One of the first things that we realized 15 years ago is almost zero companies have a revenue strategy. They have a goal. They have a budget, but they don't have a strategy that is executable by an organization. And a revenue strategy requires you to answer 5 questions. Question 1 is, what's your brand promise? If I were to look at Oak Street and say, what's your brand promise? What is it you promise the community, your customers out there that they're going to get every time they deal with you? Because your customers are expecting that today. That's what the digital world says. I want to know who you are, and I want to know what you stand for. And if I don't know who you are and I don't know what you stand for, I don't trust you. And we all know trust is step number 1 if we're going to do any serious business together. The second question is, what's the customer's problem? You solve for the customer. No one else solves. When I ask people that question, they say, well, geez, I'm a plumber. There's 5,000 plumbers here in Phoenix. We all do the same thing. Well, if you do, and that's okay if you want to, you've decided you're a commodity and you bring no value other than your time and your toolkit. Now, if you're a plumber who has a purpose, you have that brand promise, and the problem you really solve is customer satisfaction or something larger like Simon Sinek when he talks about start with why. Mm-hmm. If you combine your promise with the buyer's problem of my house is being destroyed by the leak in the roof, then all of a sudden you completely redefine who you are and what you do at a value transfer level. And value is decided by the buyer. So you can absolutely, and you look at the successful companies, BMW makes cars, but that's not what they talk about. They talk about the ultimate driving machine.
Right.
And so you go to BMW's lot if you want to buy an ultimate driving machine. You go to Disney if you want the happiest place on earth. You go to Apple if you want to solve the problem of, I'm an individual. I want to make my dent in the universe. I want to be unique.
And you want a plumber who saves homes.
Exactly. Exactly. So then the other 3 questions are, what's the niche you're going to dominate? And if you choose not to dominate a niche, you've made a strategic decision to be like everybody else that does what you do. And that's like saying, buyer, please only pay me the least amount that the other people charge. Then the 4th one is, can you identify an ideal buyer? Because not every buyer is an ideal buyer. And I bet you, like everybody else, has occasionally had a customer you wish you hadn't had.
There's a few, and we turn people away.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have some idea who your ideal buyer is. And then the 5th one is, what's the offer you make to that ideal buyer in that niche that has that problem that is compelled by the promise that you made? Because today, for most of us, you ask me the question right away, how big is my market? I've done work with people on every continent except Antarctica, because we can today. So we have to figure out who do we really want to focus on, because I only have so many resources.
Sure.
So that's more than you wanted to know.
No, it's great stuff. So what's I'm forgetting the line. It might have been Abraham Lincoln. I can't remember, but it was trying to be everything to everyone. You're nothing to no one.
Exactly. And that's one of the historic myths was if I just broadcast my message, my ad, my SEO, those things today, if I just go get enough people looking at me, life's going to be okay. Well, given your background, we know that people want to do business with people they trust. And not everybody in the world is going to trust me. And there are ways for me to pre-identify the groups most likely to trust me. And then there are ways I can manage my business to focus on building trust as opposed to pitching product. And there are ways that I can manage the relationship once I have a client to continue to grow the trust and grow a partnership, not a transaction. And that's that context piece. If I create that context and my organization means it, one of the decisions every one of us has to make that's in business every day, whether you own it or you work in it, is do I make money from my client or with my client? And once you make that decision, then you act in accordance with that decision. And that structures your context.
Yep. Okay. I'm a big fan of that too. That's kind of our business thesis, right? We partner with people and we make money together. And in fact, we usually have a preferred return or something. So investors make money first. That type of scenario. So this fits in with your description of low friction business context.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I didn't warn you, and I don't think it's in anything you've read of it. I started out as a cost accountant.
Okay.
So when I look at business, I always think about the resources we call it the revenue resources required to create an outcome. And one of the things we've measured for 30 years now is what we call the cost of the chaos to produce revenue. And chaos comes from one of two things. It's either where our internal organization competes with itself, where the silos don't get along well. And in today's high complex business, finance people don't use the same language as marketing or product design or legal. They all have their own speak. And consequently, they don't tend to play well together. And so we fund all those departments to go do what they want to do instead of what we need to do. That's the first place chaos comes from. The second place is when people don't follow the science and they follow the myths instead of the science. And the cost of chaos in a B2B company, and I've seen tens of thousands, is never less than 20% of top line, normally runs between 20 and 40% of top line. So if you had a $10 million company, just to make math easy, hand over fist, you're throwing away $2 to $4 million a year that you could easily quit doing.
Not having those different departments aligned.
That's part of it. That's absolutely a huge part of it. Because if you think about unaligned departments in a company to your customer, they don't understand why the salesperson told them one thing, the marketing message says another, the contract legal gave you to sign to do the deal doesn't match either of those two things. And they're trying to sit there, and then the people delivering say, oh no, sales said it was 2 months, it's 6 months. And the market looks at it and says, I don't trust any of this.
Right.
And so when you start to measure the cost of those lack of alignment activities, it's staggering. And it's easily fixable.
So who usually reaches out to you from companies, or how do they find you?
Usually nobody reaches out. And that's partially just. Most of our clients are always, we start with the CEO.
Okay.
Because the CEO gets up in the morning and they may not know exactly what's going on, but they would look at their business and say something like this. If you remember, the second part of a revenue strategy is what's the problem you uniquely solve for the buyer? The buyer gets up in the morning and says something like, my go-to-market process clearly is not working as well as it should. It's not predictable. And I know I'm not getting full value from the amount of resource I'm investing in this.
Right.
And they don't know what the solution is, but they know it has to be able to get better. And so at that point, that's one of the reasons I speak to Vistage groups and I speak to anybody. You mentioned EO earlier,
right.
Speak to all those kinds of places just to let them know there is a science to this. And let them know, particularly if you're the CEO and you own, as you do, you own your own business, and you realize you're throwing 20 to 40% away in cost of chaos, you're sitting there doing the math going, I could retire 3 or 4 years earlier if I just start recovering half of that.
Right.
If you're going to sell it, if you're going to sell your business and you understand about valuations and multipliers and all that kind of stuff, if I start to recover that cost of chaos and it goes to the bottom line.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is when you remove chaos, the top line takes off and you can't stop it. Because what that chaos really means is for your humans, if it's 20%, that means 1 day a week, all they do is deal with chaos. And so if you start to reduce that 1 day a week they're dealing with chaos, now they're doing what you hired them to do. And they're having more fun because none of us get up in the morning and say, boy, today's my chaos day.
So, yes. Very few of us will probably do. Let me think. So, a CEO goes, I need to fix this. This is not running the way it should. It's reassuring to know that there's some metrics and some science behind this that can put a handle on it.
Was this?
But what do you suggest they do? How do they know to contact you, and what tips would you give them?
Well, typically 80% of our work is always referral.
Okay.
And a lot of people think, referral's not nearly as good as if I do advertising. I draw people to me.
Oh, no. Referrals are perfect.
Yes, exactly right. And most people, one of the other myths, you asked that question earlier, another myth is funnels are a good idea. Funnels are a terrible idea. Because if you think about a funnel, you spend a lot of money to fill the funnel to then figure out what of it you want to throw away so you finally get to the people you want to do business with. That's crazy. You really want to think of it as a pipeline. And you want just about the same number of people to go in it as come out of it. That way, the resources you spend to fill the pipeline aren't filling that huge funnel thing that you just have to spend more money to throw the bad ones away. And so referral is the right way to do it. So we help make referrals easy. Speaking is one of those ways. I do videos every single solitary week. We've been doing revenue science questions asked and answered in 60 seconds for 2 or 3 years.
Nice.
So if people want to go, they have a question, and now today with AI, it's really easy to find that stuff. That's one way. I've actually written 3 books. The first 2 were terrible, so I didn't even publish them. But this one's really good. And so I have a new book out. And that's a really good way to let people know. And legacy to me is why I get up in the morning. I spent 40 years creating this opportunity for people to not have to pay that cost of chaos and not have that set of problems that go with that. The book's the first repeatable piece so that someday when I don't want to come or can't come to work, that the science is out there today. So
okay, excellent. What's the name of the book? Where can people find it?
It's you can find it on Amazon, and it's called Smart Rev, SMARTREV.
Okay, Smart Revenue, Smart Rev.
Yep. And our primary way today, we used to do, still do some fractional chief revenue officer work and some consulting, and we'll help people build a revenue strategy, those 5 questions, and help them figure out how to deploy those questions. But what we've learned is we certify organizations today in this, what we call chief revenue officer thinking, how to apply this science in your business. And when we do organizations, we bring together sales, marketing, product development, engineering, finance, legal, and we certify them all. Because if you don't, the languages, the professional languages those people speak, the only common word between all those groups is price. And that's not the best criteria for them to make a decision to improve their business. So we teach them a language so that they can communicate within the group, and then within, whether they're a seller or a buyer, how they can communicate to other people outside their organization in a meaningful way about the transfer of value. And once they all speak the same language, you'd be amazed at how fast their world gets better.
I'm sure they're all on the same page, right? That's where some magic happens for sure.
Absolutely. And once they understand the conversation you had and I had earlier about you make money with them or from them, believe it or not, if you ask all those silos, I pretty well guarantee you some of those silos are all about making money from their customer.
Right.
And when you get them all to realize, my gosh, we're really here to transfer as much value as we can to that buyer that they're willing to pay us for because they like it.
Right.
Their collective behavior changes. I mean, literally overnight. In the work we do, when we do a certification like that, it's about 8 weeks. At the 4th week, I've never had a session where somebody, and often multiple people, say, this has changed my world. And it's changed their world because now they know what they were doing for years was counterproductive.
Right.
And once we know something's counterproductive, most of us don't want to go back and do it again.
Right. That's powerful stuff. That has lasting impact on businesses for sure.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's what makes it fun. When you give people a way to think about their business that they didn't have before,
right,
that they see the impact on their customer, and their customer is glad to see them, and they're having partnering conversations, not negotiating price or terms. Those things are where we don't trust each other. If I don't trust you and your business, I'm going to negotiate down so that I've got some money in reserve, so when it blows up, I can fix it.
Pursue me.
Yeah, I got to pay the lawyer.
Right. Yeah, that's a big part of the joy for me doing what I do now is sharing stuff and educating people and helping them. Right, and just it's we're doing these deals. If people want to participate and partner with us and invest with us, that's great. But we don't need them, and we're just offering it, trying to help and educate them. I didn't know these types of deals were. I thought they were only institutional operators and owners of these sorts of real estate opportunities. And so, yeah, I enjoy meeting people, helping them, figuring out what their goals are, and helping them achieve their goals. It's really
you see them light up, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you get 90% of your business from referrals.
It's growing. I wouldn't say 90%, but it's growing. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And you certainly will over time if, the way you're describing what you do, and the people who you've done business with in the past,
they keep investing. So that's good.
Well, when you get a new investor and they want to know, can I trust you? You can introduce them to people you've done business with before. And that's one of the things one of the other myths is, your website's to help attract clients. Well, that's partially true. Sometimes websites do attract clients. But when you get a referral and they say, wow, I like Tim, I like what he said, the next thing they do is go look at your website. And they say, does the website match what Tim told me and what the other person told me about Tim?
Right.
And so, yes, it does help bring clients, but most of the time it's more important for the clients you've met some other way to validate that what you said kind of matches. Yeah. So that's that context thing. Once you get the context and that there's a intentional flow to this and a sequencing, and from your background in neuroscience, we get into habits and we get into, automatic things that happen to us, just messaging. Most people do messaging backwards. They start telling you, well, we've been in business for 45 years. We have great technology. We're really wonderful. The truth is what people want to hear first is, why are you doing this?
And how does it affect me?
Exactly. That number one is, can I get your attention? Number two is, can I put you in the picture? Can I make you feel that what I'm talking about is you? And then the third step is, if you see yourself in the picture, now can I help you understand how this would be real for you? And then finally, you want proof that we've been doing it for 50 years and we have 100 smart people and all that stuff. But we communicate backwards. And we somehow think that's right. It's another one of those myths.
Right. It's the relationship, right?
Yeah.
The person, the people over the stuff.
And that's another one of them that's a myth, because people ask me all the time, well, revenue or sales, that's a relationship business. Kinda. I asked the question, I've asked now probably 5,000 or 6,000 people, CEOs. I said, pretend that one of your godchildren is working for a company you don't trust, and they're selling something that's $20,000, and they're coming to see you if you want to buy one. And so your godchild's giving you this presentation, and you get to make a decision. Am I going to buy this from somebody I love who works for a company I don't trust?
Right.
And I've never had anybody say they're going to buy that $20,000 thing yet. And so while sales is a relationship business, it's also a brand-to-brand relationship business first. If I don't trust the organization that people work for, they've got a really hard time doing an enterprise kind of transaction with me.
Sure. I buy a lot of popcorn and candy bars and other things from young relatives that I love, that I don't want the product, but 20,000 is a different story.
Yeah. And that's, donations are fine, but if it's really serious business, would the relationship win us over? Because some CEOs want to build their sales team. Well, they're a relationship person. Yeah, maybe they are, but that's not enough today.
Right.
So,
yep. Great point. So, Rick, I have a reflection question I like to ask people. What do you wish you knew about building wealth and success earlier in your career?
Oh, no question. I wish I'd known about peer groups early in my career. You mentioned
like mastermind situation?
Pardon?
Like a mastermind?
Yeah, any kind of mastermind, whether it's an EO, it's a Vistage, it's a tab, it's a, whatever the one of the flavor of the day or the decade is, where you get to ask those questions that as either employees or new graduates, we've never been there before.
Okay.
And we don't know what we don't know, and we are pell-mell down the road and going, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known that.
Right.
So that's the one thing I wish I'd known. I should have been in a peer group, a mastermind.
You were trying to figure things out by yourself for too long?
Or I believe the books I read that, as I said before, were full of myths when I was in college, and I was shocked they didn't work. And, senior people who'd been there before would have said, I don't care what the book, we've seen the TV show 100 times, the crusty old guy like me says, hey, kid, I don't care what the book says, that ain't going to work.
Right.
The masterminds would have been a little more professional about it, but the result would have been the same.
Right. Okay. Good one. Good answer. Thank you. Okay. So Rick, if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, what should they do?
Well, the company's therevenuegame.com. So that's easy to find. The book is Smart Rev. That's available off of Amazon. And people can call me and I'll talk to anybody. And I just don't like people making decisions where they wish they'd known something different before they did it.
All right. Some regret for sure.
Call me anytime.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Rick McPartlin, for joining me today. Appreciate you sharing your insights and your story into success and revenue here in Phoenix, but also Canada and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.